Employee, what are some of the benefits that a typical employee may be offered in a job setting?
So I would say the traditional employee is going to have a set hourly rate or a set salary. They're going to have a defined job, and they're also going to be eligible with most employers for benefits such as health insurance, life insurance, disability. They would be eligible for workers' compensation benefits, which is one of the things we're going to talk about today.
A lot of protections that independent contractors, such as what gig situations are, these people that we're describing. Well, Dave, let's talk about, in the news that's been going on for the last several months. It's not just about the gig economy and what it is, but there's been several lawsuits involving some of the bigger companies that hire or utilize these type of these type of workers. And that's Uber and Lyft. Most people know that that's the modern day taxi. Well, taxis are still around and still very important and have their place, but it seems like everybody knows somebody who either drives for one company or the other, particularly if you're in bigger towns. Even in Birmingham, it's very thriving because we've got a lot of colleges here in town, and it's much easier now because if you've got one of these, you can very easily get on their app and just a couple of clicks and you've got somebody coming to you. So for years, all of these type of workers have been classified as independent contractors. And we've already talked about what the pros and cons of what that is. But what happens, let's just take a typical scenario and we're going to talk about this in your Alabama case in a minute, but let's say you're driving for one of these companies, Uber, Lyft, whichever one, and you get into an accident where you've caused injuries or harm to another party. Well, if you're a Uber or Lyft or an independent contractor, Dave, talk about the insurance aspects typically of this.
So first, let's take the driver, the Uber driver. They're probably not going to have workers' compensation insurance unless they took out a policy on themselves. And most people are not going to have that. So therefore, they're not going to have the protection of an employer's workers' compensation benefits. And generally, in most states, workers' compensation benefits is going to provide you with medical treatment. It's going to provide you with payments while you're off work. It's going to provide you mileage reimbursement when you go to a doctor or a pharmacy. So those are just some of the benefits you would receive if you were covered under an employer's workers' compensation insurance. And then there's the issue of whether the driver of the Uber caused the accident, and if so, if his passengers were injured, and how much insurance coverage is going to cover those drivers, those passengers in the Uber.
And it really, if you're not covered under some policy of insurance, all of your assets, anything that you have, that you've earned, that you've put together, are at risk. So there's been several lawsuits that have been filed. Some have been settled. Some are in the midst of going. In fact, let me just read to you a little bit of some of the things that we've seen. And the reason why, and we've touched on this a little bit, but the reason why these companies have for years enjoyed the benefits of having such labor is they avoid paying expense reimbursements, minimum wage standards, overtime pay, taxes to the IRS. That could go on and on and on about all these cost savings, even though the drivers are still giving such benefit to these companies. Now, I'm reading here, Lyft has already settled some of the lawsuits to the tune of at least $29 million, while Uber is apparently willing to pay a few $100 million. However, just I saw yesterday online that Uber says now it will fight the state of California to preserve its independent contractor-based business model. And that status is now in jeopardy after the state, and leads me to my next thing, is they just passed in California Assembly Bill 5, which effectively goes into effect January 1st of next year. The governor signed the bill that takes effect, that now it makes it more difficult for companies to show that they have independent contractors and not employees. These companies are now going to have to show that the work performed is outside the usual course of business for that entity. And what that's going to do is potentially take all of these independent contractors and make them employees. And what's that going to do to the bottom line of these companies now?
Well, as an Uber user, I like these. I like Uber. As a lawyer for injured workers, I want more people covered under workers' compensation. I want them to have the coverage and the benefits that they do get with those laws. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in California and to see how other states handle those independent contractors and Uber and gig economy workers.
It does, and this doesn't just apply to people who drive for a living for these companies. This is really anybody who is in the gig economy. I know we keep saying that, but that really is the term that's given to these part-time jobs where the people have more freedom, more independence, but they probably also need some of the benefits that come along and protections that come along as being an employee. And we'll get back to this. This is by no means a settled or resolved matter. We're going to come back to this in the upcoming weeks or months when there's more news, when more decisions have been made public, when there's just more things for us to report about this. But we certainly welcome any comments, any questions, any experiences you may have as being a person in that industry. If you had any experiences, good or bad, where you've been an independent contractor on a gig assignment, so to speak, but you've had some kind of experience where it either has helped you or has been detrimental in your situation. And at any point in time, guys, we welcome any comments or questions or concerns. I know this is streaming through YouTube. Hopefully it's over to the Facebook page, but I can't quite seem to be able to find it just yet. It's a work in progress. It's a brand new venture for us, so we appreciate your patience and understanding. Dave, I want to kind of pivot a little bit. This is what we just talked about really is a national concern, and will have implications for many businesses and millions of employees. I think we saw a stat where there's somewhere in the neighborhood of more than 55 million people are working in the gig economy. And what kind of...
Yeah, there's a Gallup survey shows that about 36% of U.S. workers have some sort of gig. 29% rely on an alternative work arrangement. So
and those percentages, when you look at the statistics, they're only going up in all. So it is a very important topic to stay on top of. But now we're going to kind of shift a little bit, and I want to talk about, we're going to bring this back to our state, to Alabama, where we practice law. And we've been fortunate over the years. We've now been partnered up for over 16 years. Seems like forever, but it's, I think, 16 calendar years. And we've been all over the state. Just this week alone, we've been as far south as Bay Minette, down in Baldwin County, Fairhope and Mobile area. We've been all the way up into Huntsville, Decatur, Fayette, Tuscaloosa. We've been all over the place. So we're fortunate to have clients spread out everywhere. But what we want to talk about really involves Alabama law, and not just Alabama work comp laws. But Dave, talk to us. You had a very interesting case a few years ago that really kind of touches a little bit about what we've talked about here, in that I believe your client was a driver.
That's right.
And was injured on the job. So share a little bit of that background, and then let's talk about that for a minute or two.
Yeah. So my client was an employee, and her job was involved. Job duties included driving for her employer. She drove a company vehicle. And what I want to talk about first is when you're hurt in Alabama and you have a claim against your employer, it's called it's called the exclusive remedy. In other words, you get hurt at work, you can only sue your employer for workers' compensation benefits. That's your exclusive right or exclusive remedy under Alabama law. And so often we hear from clients and other people, well, this is just a workers' compensation claim. This is only a workers' compensation claim. And I think that so many injured workers hear that and they think, well, it's just a work comp claim, so my employer's going to take care of me, or the insurance company that I'm dealing with will take care of me, or this case manager, case nurse, because it's just a work comp claim. And what I want to talk about a little bit today is this case where I represented the driver who worked for a company, and how it was just a work comp case until it wasn't, and how we were able to recover benefits for her outside of workers' compensation. So my client was driving a company vehicle, another car struck the vehicle she was driving in, which led to very serious injuries for my client. She ended up having a cervical fusion. She had a neck surgery. And work comp did what they were supposed to do. They paid the medical treatment, they paid for the TTD benefits, or what's called temporary total disability benefits, the money that was paid to her while she was off work recovering. So there, she did benefit by being an employee of the company, whereas if she was an independent contractor, she's not going to have those weekly checks coming in. But because she hired me, and I'm thankful that she did, we were able to investigate her case and look for other avenues to benefit her. And those other avenues were the driver that caused the collision. We were able to recover his insurance policy limits. And my client also had uninsured or underinsured motorist coverage. And there was also underinsured coverage on the vehicle that she was operating. So we were able to recover the underinsured motorist coverage on the vehicle she was operating. And then we went to her underinsured coverage and got her money there. So many people are limited to just the work comp recovery. Fortunately, our client was able to recover from other sources. And had she considered this and looked at it just as a work comp claim, then she would not have been able to recover more money to compensate her for her pain and suffering, her lost wages, and all the recovery, the months and years of recovery that she went through.
Well, let me pause you there. Let's
Yeah.
talk about that for just a minute. Let's talk about the difference between a workers' comp case in Alabama, the remedies, the damages, or the recoveries, the rights that you have, in comparison to your insurance claim. And when I say insurance claim, I'm talking about the automobile policy that was at issue, that was applicable. So compare those a little bit.
Sure. So with most work comp claims, there are 5 benefits that an injured worker can get in Alabama. We talked about temporary total disability benefits, which is payments when you're off work. We've talked about the medical treatment, so it's free medical treatment on the injured body parts. Talked about the mileage reimbursement, you get reimbursed for doctor's visits, hospital visits, physical therapy visits. And then the last 2 benefits that someone may be entitled to are compensation for a physical impairment rating and compensation for a vocational disability, meaning they can't go back to the same type of job and they can't find a similar paying job. So those are pretty much all the benefits you can get with work comp when it's just a work comp claim. Now, because she had insurance and because another party, a third party, caused injury to her, we were able to recover from insurance companies outside of work comp. And for that, we were able to get her compensated for pain and suffering, for emotional distress, for mental anguish, and for lost wages.
The Alabama work comp laws are so limiting right now, and they've been in place for a few decades, 3 decades. And I won't we'll save for another day our criticisms of those laws. But in general, because you can't get pain and suffering, because you can't be reimbursed for lost wage, or to punish the other people, the employer, because it's an exclusive set of laws, how are those cases resolved in general? Meaning, do you go to a jury? Do you go to a judge? How do you resolve that type of a case?
Yeah, it's just a work comp claim. Then you don't get a jury. A judge will decide the degree of disability of the injured worker. And it's also, most cases are now resolved through settlement or at mediation prior to trying the case. Whereas if this was a car wreck case and we were going against the person who caused the wreck or our client's uninsured, underinsured motorist, that issue could be decided by a jury. One of the takeaways that I want to share with workers in Alabama on this particular case is that it doesn't cost you anything to allow a lawyer to review your particular situation. Allowing a lawyer to look this over can possibly increase your recovery and look for other ways to recover money for you when you've been hurt at work.
Let's look at your case overall. How long did it take for that case to resolve?
Because my client was really or severely injured, her recovery took a long time. I think just alone, that was about a year and a half from the time of the accident to the time where her doctor says, you're about as good as you're going to get. You're at maximum medical improvement. And I think within about 6 months of being declared maximum medical improvement by the doctor, we were able to reach a resolution with workers' compensation, with the other driver's insurance, as well as the two uninsured or underinsured motorist carriers.
And when she was able to resolve the cases against everyone, was there a trial for any of this? Did you have to try any cases, or was it
No,
just settled amongst the parties?
lawsuits were filed. We did not have to try the case. We received insurance policy limits from the 3 insurance companies. So that was as good as we were going to do. We got all the insurance money from those insurance companies, which alleviated the need to try the cases.
Now, we talked a few minutes ago about the exclusivity of Alabama work comp laws. And I think you touched on the fact that when you are injured as an employee on the job, the work comp laws kick in, meaning that you only have your legal theories for being hurt on the job as an employee against your employer. But in your scenario, there was third parties involved. And so you were able to go outside of the comp because this was not against these other theories, were against the people who caused the accident. Maybe I can't remember, was it their employer? No. Or was it just another individual?
An individual. Yeah, an individual that had insurance.
Well, let's take it a step further. Let's say that person was driving for their company at the time they caused your client's accident. What potentially changes about that scenario, if anything?
Well, the driver, if the driver that caused the accident that injured our client, if he had been working, then he too would have had a workers' compensation claim. Even if he caused the accident, he would still have the protection of the Alabama Workers' Compensation Act, so that he could receive those benefits through his employer.
So let's compare this scenario with someone who has come to you in this same fact pattern, but drives for one of those companies, Uber or Lyft. What's the difference now?
I'd say the big difference is we're probably not talking about workers' compensation, because more than likely, as we talked about before, those drivers are not going to have work comp through Uber or Lyft, and they're probably not going to have a policy that they took out on themselves for workers' compensation. So we can kind of just remove the workers' compensation discussion from that issue.
Now let's look at the policy of insurance that we hope that our driver, the Uber or Lyft driver, has. What typically does their own personal policy have to say about being involved in an accident, but it's during a time that you're working for someone?
Yeah. Most policies are going to exclude and not allow insurance to apply if you're driving in a commercial sense, if you're driving other people for money. So if you are a driver, you better make sure, you need to talk to your agent and make sure that your insurance is going to cover you and your passengers while you're operating the vehicle as a driver.
Well, that certainly is one of my takeaways for today, that if you work for any company, but you're considered an independent contractor or a temp person, you're not an employee, you're a 1099, not a W-2, meaning taxes aren't taken out, and those kind of things. And you have policies of insurance that apply to something that you're doing, such as driving or delivering or whatever it is. You need to get with your agent who sold you that policy, go over that policy language about this very issue, because it may be an exclusion that if you're driving or working at the time for another company, meaning making money, you're working, there may be an exclusion there. So if there's an exclusion, then you may not have any protections from your employer, because there's no work comp, or from your personal insurance, because again, there's an exclusion. And most of the time, my experience is that those companies, Uber, Lyft, whoever it is that you're working for, are not going to be insuring you either, because it's not their vehicle. You're not their employee. So there's a real drawback there. So going back to your scenario, your client here works for Uber or Lyft or whoever. they get hit by a driver from another company, and it's not your client's fault. So we have no work comp. We have no underinsured or uninsured coverage. So that's going to leave us what avenue to pursue?
Against the driver that caused the accident. That's you're limiting yourself to one avenue of recovery. That would, in that situation, would be against the driver that caused the accident. Whereas, in the situation we talked about earlier, our client had multiple avenues of recovery.
And because we only practice in the state of Alabama, we're not addressing any other state's laws. We're talking in the general when it refers to the insurance policies, because every state is a little bit different. You need to look at your own policy with the people who sold it to you. Typically, it'll be your agent. But this is the kind of work that we do. This is what we do every day, every week. We see cases just like this. And so these are scenarios that are real scenarios that we want to bring to you to explain how Alabama law works and the rights and protections that you may or may not have. It's very dangerous to just get on the internet and start Googling things. It really is. Regardless if you call us or any other lawyer, make sure that whatever sources that you're looking up when you're getting getting your laws, and it could be that you're getting it from someone who in your household or a friend or a loved one or a neighbor who loves you very much and cares for you very much. And they may even practice law, but they may or may not practice the kind of law that's needed.
And don't rely on your employer, the case nurse, the work comp carrier, the adjuster to tell you what your rights are or what's in your best interest, because they don't work for you. And that's why you should talk to a lawyer that specializes in that particular area of law. Because again, it doesn't cost you any money. You might as well make the phone call and get some advice.
That's right. Well, guys, this will be that we're concluding our inaugural Alabama Work Comp Today episode, and we sure appreciate you spending some time. I can't see who's out there, but I see we've had half a dozen to a dozen people on at any given time, so we really appreciate you spending a few minutes with us. If you've got any topics you want us to cover, if you've got anything that you want us to address here on the program, we're welcome to do so. We just send us either a message through the comments in the chat or send us private messages. Dave, what do you got coming up? I know we've got a big seminar tomorrow that I get to speak at, so I'm kind of excited about that.
Yeah.
Any things we got coming up next weeks or two that's of interest to anybody?
Yeah, looking forward to that tomorrow. I know we've got some judges speaking, so that's always good to learn from our judges. I know we're back in court next week. I've got some hearings. We've got some settlement hearings coming up. And then we've got a big conference out of state in October, which I know we're both looking forward to.
Yeah. Well, guys, this will conclude us for today. We really appreciate your time and your few minutes. As always, we can be reached at 205-930-6900. We practice in Birmingham, Alabama, but we're all over the state. We'll be glad to talk to you. Y'all be well. Take care.